We're on TV now.
Are they streaming this?
Not live.
Streaming, just recording. All right. Good evening, everyone. I'll call tonight's meeting to order for Wednesday, July 6, 2022. If you would, please call the roll, Mr. Metz.
Gary Gross. Jim Hall. Here. Todd Moore.
Here.
Dan Ward.
Here.
Jerry Heidenreich.
Here.
David Cash.
Here.
Christopher Ambergy.
Present.
You have quorum.
Thank you very much. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, next on our agenda this evening is our minutes from April 6th. Has everyone had a chance to read the minutes? Did want to point out a couple minor typos. One on page 1, spelling of my name, Todd Moore, 2 O's, not 1, but also also on page 4, it says where Mr. Hall asked Mr. Metz, it should be the blue area, not the. Just a couple minor things that I happened to catch as we were reading the minutes, but any other comments regarding the minutes? All right, do I have a motion to accept the minutes?
I move we accept the minutes.
In a second?
Second.
Mr. Metz?
Christopher Ambergy.
Yes.
David Cash.
Yes.
Jerry Heidenreich.
Yes.
Dan Ward.
Yes.
Todd Moore.
Yes.
Jim Hall.
Yes.
Okay, that brings us to our first case this evening. This is variance case number 622. A request by Peter Brandt for approval of an area and dimensional variance for the property located at 4563 Roosevelt Boulevard. Sorry, you moved through there. The property is zoned B2, and the variance requested is for reduction of open space of 19% square footage, whereas the development code requires at least 51%. We'll have Mr. Cash, I guess, swear in Mr. Metz and others this evening.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give before this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the public hearing for variance case 622 is for applicant Peter Brandt at 4563 Roosevelt Boulevard for a variance in the reduction of open space to 19% total square footage, whereas the development code requires at least a majority. I'm not sure why my mouse isn't working.
Mm-hmm.
So the property is Zone B2, Community Business District. The purpose of the B2 Community District is to provide for areas of the city that will contain a wide variety of commercial and office uses to meet the needs of the city and region that require access to major arterial streets and are in close proximity to major residential neighborhoods. As you can see here, this is 4563, and this is where the applicant will be located. The Middletown Development Code, Chapter 1204.09, Use-Specific Standards, states a microbrewery, microdistillery, and microwinery shall be allowed in the B1, 2, 3, BC, and UC districts when the majority of the floor area is dedicated to being used for restaurant services or for the serving of drinks made on site, so the use fits into the retail character of the districts. Per the Middletown Development Code, the requirement for legal notice for variance requests, meeting notices, letters for the proposed variance were sent to all property owners contiguous and directly across the street of the public right-of-way, and no comments were received. Here are the area and dimensional variance review criteria. Would you like me to read them for you? For the record.
Do others need?
I usually do, but sometimes I get cut off, so I didn't know if you.
Yeah.
Fine with me if we don't.
Well, I guess what I would suggest, since we have 4 applications, 3 of them having to do with you,
The area and dimensional, and then one is the use.
read once, and then I'm assuming that we all have enough memory to
That sounds good. Thank you.
recall them.
The following factors shall be considered and weighed by the BZA to determine practical difficulty. Whether special conditions and circumstances exist which are peculiar to the land or structure involved and which are not applicable generally to other lands or structures in the same zoning district. Example of such special conditions or circumstances are exceptional irregularity, narrowness, shallowness, or steepness of the lot, or adjacency to nonconforming or inharmonious uses, structures, or conditions. Whether the property in question will yield a reasonable return, or whether there can be any beneficial use of the property without the variance. Whether the special conditions or circumstances are a direct result from the actions of the applicant, his or her agents, or prior property owners. Whether the variance is substantial and is the minimum necessary to make the possible reasonable use of the land or structures. Whether the essential character of the neighborhood would be substantially altered, or whether adjoining properties would suffer substantial detriment as a result of the variance. Whether the variance would adversely affect the delivery of governmental services such as water, sewer, electric, refuse pickup, or other vital services. Whether special conditions or circumstances exist as a result of actions of the owner. Whether the property owner's predicament can feasibly be obviated through some method other than a variance. Whether the spirit or intent behind the code requirement would be observed and substantial justice done by granting a variance. Whether the granting of the variance requested would confer on the applicant any special privilege that is denied by this regulation to other lands, structures, or buildings in the same district. No single factor listed above may control, and not all factors may be applicable in each case. Each case shall be determined on its own facts. Any person or entity claiming to be injured or aggrieved by any final action of the Board of Zoning Appeals has the right to appeal the decision the Court of Common Pleas as provided in the Ohio Revised Code chapters 2505 and 2506. Additionally, I'd like to state that the applicant is here, and there is a specific reason why the applicant is asking for a reduced open space area that I believe that he can speak to in a more clear manner. Additionally, all information that was gathered and provided to me was provided to you in your staff packets.
Thank you very much. Any other questions for Mr. Metz before we open the public hearing?
The open area, that's inside the building. It's being used, in this case, as a microbrewery, right?
That is correct.
Okay. So it's designed to allow for foot traffic into the business and have enough space for people?
Yes. So in the case of like a microbrewery, distillery, or micro winery, the point of, and it only, in the development code, it states only for the B districts. B is primarily used for retail, and this would be more of a, still a retail use. It still would fall under retail and service commercial uses, but it's designed to be congruent with other shopping, more retail based. So for customers to kind of flow in, be able to eat, drink, buy whatever they do, and then be able to come out.
So in reality, the reduction of this open space works to the detriment of the applicant's business? Since apparently, well, I asked the applicant, but it would appear that if there's a request for smaller open space, there's less people that can be in there, which would possibly adversely affect the business.
That is correct. And additionally, I don't know if I made it clear. I don't believe I did, but if this was a different business, when we have open space requirements for retail, so if the building or the company had 5 different uses, it would only have to be the majority, whereas this is only 2 uses, which one would be making alcoholic beverages, and the second one would be the open space tasting room, which is why I would have to have the 51%. But if it had multiple more uses, then the majority would shrink as well.
What's the required open space in is this a B2? What's the required open space?
It's just majority. That's all is stated within the development code.
And the proposed variance would reduce that from a majority to what? Do you know?
Well, in this
You don't
case,
know,
it's
ask
only,
the applicant.
it's only 2 uses. So it would go from the 2 uses is just making alcohol, which would be one, and the second use would be to sell the alcohol, which would be a retail use. The square foot of the open space square foot that they're requesting to have is 19% of the building.
Gotcha.
Or the tenancy.
So a reduction of 32%.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions from Mr. Metz before we open the public hearing? Okay. Seeing none, I will now open the public hearing. If anyone wishes to speak in favor of the proposed variance, please come forward. Mr. Cash will swear you in.
That's you, sir? Have a seat. Come on up to the podium here and I'll swear you in. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give before this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thanks.
Hello, my name is Peter Brandt. I'm very excited to be representing Paul and Peter Brandt LLC. It's a partnership between me and my father today, and to be opening a micro distillery at 4563 Roosevelt Boulevard in Middletown, Ohio. We're applying for the zoning variance today as our planned layout only has 19% of its square footage dedicated to commercial use or a tasting room instead of the required 51%. This is planned and required this way for a couple of reasons on our part. I know it might seem like we're limiting the amount of sales that we can have. So when manufacturing liquor, the final product represents anywhere from 10 to 15% of the raw material used. And that's because it's a condensed beverage, whereas in beer is sold right at the brewing percentage. So this is a much smaller percentage than, like I said, a brewery or a winery, and therefore we require a much larger warehousing space for our production comparison to any of the previously mentioned businesses. Additionally, when you're making liquor, you have a potential to create a hazardous environment when distilling the spirit. Ethanol is flammable as a vapor, so there are much higher safety precautions taken. One of these safety measures is to space out the equipment more. So we are required for any of our vessels containing liquor or for the production of liquor to have at least a 25-foot radius between that vessel and any other device that is not classified as explosion proof. So our tanks that hold the final product, our bottling operation, our stills, and our pumps that are used to move the liquor will all either need to be spaced out 25 feet from everything else or meet this classification standard. So the layout that's been attached, I believe, in all of your packets, we were still able to maintain quite a large square footage for our tasting room, which is 1,600 feet, which includes the full storefront to keep the spirit of the commercial shopping mall or the strip mall in existence. And the square footage mentioned also does not include the public bathrooms. I didn't know if they counted as part of the square footage or not. Additionally, we're open to the possibility of offering tours to our patrons so that they can experience how the product is made. So this would open more square footage to them, but it would only be under certain hours when the equipment isn't running. So we are looking forward to starting this business, and if you have any more questions, let me know.
So primarily, are you distilling alcohol, whiskey? What will be?
Yeah, so our plan right now is to make 4 different types of liquor. So we'll focus on vodka and gin and agave spirit, which is what we can call tequila here in Ohio, and then also whiskey.
Okay. And in planning your business and choosing this location, were you in contact with the city in terms, and I'm really focusing on safety here, considering that you have potential for fire or other hazards with distilling something like alcohol. So can you tell us a little bit how you arrived at that process? Or
Yeah, so we already applied for the COZ, what is the
That's correct. The certificate of zoning compliance.
certificate of zoning compliance, and that was already
We're waiting for this to be approved or denied or approved with modifications.
Right. But the strip mall itself is in the B2 district, so it's already zoned properly for a microbrewery, winery, or distillery. Additionally, there's a sprinkler system already installed, and it's already been used as a bar in the past. I believe it was a Buffalo Wild Wings for a period of time. So we also know that it is considered a wet premises, so that sales of liquor will be okay. As far as the fire safety inspection goes, we are needing some construction to be done to the facility. So once that is completed, is when we'll get the approvals from the fire department.
So having that compliance in place, the reduction is primarily for safety. Is that correct?
It is. It's primarily for safety, yes, and to allow enough room to safely manufacture in the manufacturing area. So safety both for us being the operators of the equipment, and also safety for the patrons to be able to space them out and not have any risks while they are enjoying a sample or buying a bottle. Yes.
Thank you.
I got a question. What's your interface with the public, the front
So
tasting?
the interface will be a solid wall that's airtight, so that if obviously we don't want any fumes to be coming off of our still, but should that happen, they will not be within the hazardous zone. So the ethanol actually is it's heavier than air when it's a vapor. So the real risk is near the floor, because you can't smell it because it's down there. So we also will be installing monitors around floor level to detect any sort of ethanol.
Okay, well, on your layout here, is that indicating a door to the front? Or is
Yes,
that
but that door will be closed during operations. It would be open for, say, tours, for the public to walk through there to see the equipment. Similar to how when you go through, I guess it's not really comparable to a microbrewery, but if you've ever been on a distillery tour in, say, Kentucky or any other micro distilleries, they will never have their stills actually producing liquor while patrons are around.
Okay, so are you going to have a cash register behind the wall, or how do you buy something?
Yeah, the lobby / tasting area has not been formally laid out yet, but the cash register and everything for food service would be on the outside of that wall. Yeah. The dotted line around the manufacturing area represents a bonded premises, so that's required by the state of Ohio. Anything that we take outside of that dotted line, we have to pay taxes on. Then it becomes a saleable good.
Sir, you said you have 1,600 square feet in the tasting room,
Yes.
which I was trying to do some math to try to figure out what 51%.
So the
would
square
equate.
footage of the
So
building is
if I take 3,200.
square footage of the building is 8,400 square feet.
Mhm.
If that helps at all. So it would have to be 4,200 square feet.
4,200.
A little over that for a majority, technically.
Since apparently part of the rationale for the open area is for the flow of customers in and out, are you going to be a wine or a liquor bar where people can come in and just sit at a high top and have a couple of highballs?
So we will with our own product, but not with say you won't be able to come to our place and get a vodka and tonic without it being our vodka.
I understand.
But yes,
You
absolutely.
will be serving
Drinks.
on site
Correct.
patrons. How many patrons would you estimate that 1,600 square feet would accommodate?
Probably anywhere from 50 to 70 at one time.
Okay, all right.
So are there tables or a bar, or how?
It'll be a mixture of high tops, tables. It'll mainly be an order at a counter and then take your drink back to an open table. Very minimal overhead.
You mentioned food service. What's the plans for that?
So food service is required by the permit that we have to get to make the liquor. So essentially, it'll be bare bones food service, kind of like what you'd find at like a golf course. Chips, snacks, things of that nature.
Does that qualify as chips and snacks
We-
would be different than hamburgers and hot dogs?
Correct. We are required to have something that's heated. We're still trying to figure out how we're going to do that. If it's just going to be
Potato chips.
like a microwave or something, but before we can make kind of those final decisions, we need to know what space we're going to be working with, right?
Okay.
But the main purpose is a tasting room, so it'll be for patrons to come in, try the product. If they like it, hopefully buy a bottle on their way out, tell people about it.
Based on what you've described as the food service, has the planning department approved that?
That actually will happen after this.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I just picked up the
So that-
packet from the health and safety.
That's not been decided yet.
Correct.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
As far as tours are concerned, how are you gonna manage that? Since it'll be back in the areas where there is vapors and heat and.
Yeah, so it would be after operating hours. So our main operating hours would be when most people are at work, say 7 a.m. to 4 or 5 p.m. And then we predict that a majority of our patrons would show up after that time when most people get out of work. And then on the weekends, we will not be operating, so all of the equipment will be down anyways. There might still be fermenting going on, but there won't be distilling going on, if that makes sense. Similar to a brewery.
Any other questions?
Yeah, do we have occupancy laws concerning this 1,600 square feet? He's estimating, I assume looking for, from a business standpoint, 50, what was it? 50 to 70 occupancy in 1,600 square feet. What saith the city to that?
If I could mention, that would be part of the fire code,
Yes,
and it has to do with the amount of tables in there, exits and everything, so it'll be determined at that time.
okay. You understand what he just said?
I do. To be honest, I just threw that number out when I was asked the question, so yeah, that number is subject to change.
You're really not wanting to pack people in there. You want them to come in, sample, buy a bottle, and leave.
Correct.
There's no entertainment or anything like that there to keep them there.
Couple TVs maybe, but not like we're not going to have live music or anything of that sort. No.
Well, any other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else wishing to come forward to speak in favor of the variance, please come forward. Mr. Cash would swear you in. Anyone else?
Do you solemnly swear or affirm, sir, that that the testimony you give before this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
So I didn't have anything prepared, but I'm Paul Brandt, be in partnership with Peter. I just basically want to know if you had any questions, maybe. If it's technical, I'm not your guy. Just to let you know, that's the guy for your technical. But if you have any general business questions, I could certainly try to answer them.
We won't ask your business plan.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
Wait a minute, I do have a question. Sure. Maybe we wrap our heads around this. Are you familiar with the White Dog on Central Avenue? White Dog distillery there?
No, I'm not actually.
Okay. It just seems to me like they're going to be diametrically opposed to the business they do there, where they bring people in and they want them to stay, want them to listen to music and things like that. This is totally the opposite.
It's a different business model, right? Our business model is more. We're more into the distilling and commercial end of it. I mean, we're going to be looking for commercial customers to do business with, like restaurants and that type of thing, as opposed to street traffic. We're certainly not going to turn it away, but that's not what our central business model is.
Anyone else? Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Having had a couple folks speak in favor, we'll now ask if anyone wishes to speak in opposition. Anyone wish to speak in opposition to proposed variance? Okay, hearing none, I'll close the public hearing. I probably have to ask you this now, Mr. Metz. You'll have to kind of fill me back in on this. It's been a little while. Are you able to issue staff recommendations in area and dimensional variance cases? Are we doing that?
That is only for planning commission now.
Only for planning commission, so we will not have a staff recommendation, so we will move to deliberations among ourselves, so.
And you will bring us, at the next meeting, you will bring us why? No, I'm serious. Bring it for me, if nobody else.
Okay.
I want to know why. No longer for us, only for planning commission. It's a fair question.
Absolutely.
I thought, didn't Mr. Yoder
Yeah, he said something.
explain that to us in that training session, I thought?
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's been a little while in the training, and I was gonna try to recall some of those details myself, but I
Thought that was a topic of discussion at that time, and maybe there's a transcript of it. But I thought that we.
I'm sorry. What?
In fact, I thought that was really the primary purpose, one of the primary purposes of that training.
Of that training session, the one that was a few months ago, right?
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
4 or 5 months ago.
I remember, this is just off the top of my head, that I could go through the use variance criteria and tell you whether or not the city would approve it or not. And that's something
I think to help Mr. Amberg and the rest of us, would you confer with Mr. Yoder to confirm whether or not we discussed that matter? Because I thought, my impression was there was not going to be staff recommendations henceforth.
Exactly right. I do have a question on this layout. Where is the final approval for the layout? How is that handled?
So for me, if you guys approve this today, I will approve the certificate of zoning compliance. He's already in compliance with zoning for us with this business model, would work perfectly. After that, it would go through the building department, which would be seen by the chief building official to make sure that it meets the safety requirements, and then also be seen by the fire marshal, which makes sure that it would have the certain occupancy. And then after that, I think if there's any issues that would arise, there might be some tweaking of the building layout. But if it was to change the open space to less than what is required now, like so they're asking for 19%, if it would change the open space down to, let's say, 10%, then they would have to come back, right? But otherwise, as long as this layout is, as long as the open space percentage remains 19% or greater, the layout can change, and that would be fine.
Okay, good. That's a question I was going to ask. So my question is, but for does this satisfy, with the reduction in the open space requirements, does it still satisfy the business or the rationale for a B2 use?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
just a couple comments as we move through this case. To your point, Mr. Cash, since it does meet the B2 requirement, I was going to move us in terms of hardship. If you'll look on page 2, whether or not it's within the spirit and intent of the code itself. I see this as a practical difficulty. I think what we're trying to do is to accommodate the applicant in a way that allows them to move their business forward. And for safety reasons, they're asking for a reduction in space. It seems to me that they've met all other requirements. I would say that they are within the spirit and intent, and it does meet that requirement of a practical difficulty. I would be in favor of granting the variance.
I would, do we have a motion?
No, we're
Okay.
just deliberations
Okay.
at this point.
Well, I will,
Yeah.
following what Chairman Moore has just indicated, I would move that the variance be granted and that apparently it looks as though sections A, small 2, 4, and 10, which was, 9, which was the section you cited, being that the substantial justice be done by granting the variance. I would move that those 3 criteria justify the granting of this variance.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Metz?
Jim Hall,
Yes.
Todd Moore,
Yes.
Dan Ward,
Yes.
Jerry Heidenreich,
Yes.
David Cash,
Yes.
Christopher Ambergy.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Make sure we got our bases covered.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Yep.
Good luck.
Okay. All right, that moves us to our next case, number 722. And I'm hoping that I will pronounce the name correctly. Is it Props?
Correct.
Okay, all right, make sure. Okay, this is case number 722, a request by Jessica Props for approval of an area and dimensional variance for the property located at 2004 Pearl Street. The property is zoned R4, and the variance requested is for the installation of a pool in the front yard, whereas the development code requires all pools to be located in the side or rear yard. Mr. Metz.
Thank you. So, variance case 7-22 is an area and dimensional variance by applicant Jessica Props for installation of pool in the front yard. The property is zoned R4, which is our highest density residential district. The purpose of the R4 attached residential district is to provide for moderate to high density residential development, generally located in the core area of the city that reflects the historic urban development pattern in and around downtown Middletown. The Middletown Development Code, Chapter 1206.01, Accessory Uses and Structures, states outdoor swimming pools are permitted in the side and rear yard only. Any swimming pool shall be subject to the standards of this subsection, including pools that are designed to be temporary in nature. A, swimming pools that are enclosed within buildings shall not be subject to these standards. B, the outer wall of the swimming pool shall be set back a minimum of 6 feet from any side or rear lot line. The pool shall also meet all front yard setbacks, except on a corner lot where the pool shall be set back a minimum distance equal to 1/2 of the front yard setback requirement in the applicable district from the secondary street as determined by the Development Code Administrator. C, the outer wall of the swimming pool shall be set back a minimum of 6 feet from a dwelling on the lot or at least 3 feet from any structure having no basement, including the principal structure or accessory structure found on the same lot. D, any walks or paved areas adjacent to the pool shall be considered as patios for the purpose of this chapter and shall conform to the provisions of this chapter. E, any pool for the use of occupants or of multifamily dwellings containing over 3 dwelling units or those that are accessory to a non-residential use shall meet the structural and sanitary requirement of the Ohio Department of Health as may be applicable. Here you see table 1206-1, permitted accessory uses and structures. Here you see swimming pools outdoors. They're permitted with some substandards, which I just read to you within the R4 district. Yards where it's permitted is S&R, which is only side and rear, and it would require a certificate of zoning compliance. Per the Middletown Development Code, the requirements for legal notice for variance requests, meeting notice letters for the proposed variances were sent out to the property owners contiguous and directly across the street of the public right-of-way, and no comments were received. The air and dimensional variance review criteria is the same as before.
Thank you, Mr. Metz. Any questions?
Just one. Would you throw that photograph back up of the front? Because there was some confusion with Mr. Hall and I that one right, is that a trampoline that's currently out there?
That is a trampoline. I do want to note, as you see below, photos from June 2019.
Yeah, okay.
Today, when I went to take photos, it was storming, so I decided to use Google Images.
The only reason I asked, because the photos that were in our packet, you could maybe perceive that being as the pool's already there, but it surely looks like with that photograph that it's a trampoline.
I believe the pool may already be there.
It's not bad.
That is.
Also, there's a playhouse in the vacant lot right in the front.
All right. We will open the public hearing if there's no other questions. Any other question for Mr. Metz? Okay, we'll open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak?
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
When you were out there, did you happen to, the lady that's, Jessica, when she wrote this up, said there's a power line in the back. Is there some unusual characteristic of the power line in the back that you noticed? Is it lower than normal or what? Because I haven't seen that as a...
I did see a big black cord connected to the back of the house. I cannot confirm whether it's a power line or internet line or DSL or anything like that. But I do know that it's a safety concern typically to have a pole underneath of an electrical wire.
Since she raised that in her application, and I know what Mr. Heidenreich was just mentioning, it appears like it's the electric source coming into the house from probably the transmission line down the alley. Is that where the transmission line is?
Yeah, the transmission line goes down the alley behind her house.
Okay.
And then comes into the back of her house.
And it appears, if I'm getting my directions, it appears that the electric supply is on the north side of the roof? Or at the juncture of the house and the roof?
I think it's the east side, but yeah, it's in the
side,
back.
maybe.
It's in the backyard.
It was on the southwest side.
Southwest side. Yeah, from what I remember, the power line comes in the back here somewhere.
This corner.
Right through the middle of that backyard, or does it go through go in on one of the sides, which would allow for an open area for this pool, which I'm assuming is about the same size as that trampoline, because there's not much else that could go in there. So it would appear you don't know where that line is going, traversing the rear backyard or the rear yard.
I made sure to look to see if there was one to follow up with our applicant, but this was like a month ago.
Okay, thank you.
Well, just to expand your question, that's what I was thinking, is does it prohibit, without violating safety things or safety codes where you're putting a pool under an electric line, does that prohibit them from putting it in the backyard?
For the zoning department and using the development code, it would not. We don't have anything that states that you cannot put a pool underneath of a power line.
Okay, but we believe it's a safety issue possibly.
That is what the applicant is saying, and that's what I'm...
All right. If the applicant's here, we'll explore.
She's not.
I know.
Okay. They're
Unless one of these gentlemen is Jessica.
What I saw.
well, let's. If there's no other questions, we'll open the public hearing. So you're saying there's no one here from the family at all? Is that?
That is correct.
Okay. So, matter of formality, is there anyone wishing to speak in favor of the variance? Hearing none. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing. Before we get into deliberations, I just want to say that I did drive the site, and I wanted to see firsthand what we were discussing this evening. The backyard itself is completely fenced in with a very large wooden fence, the entire
Privacy
back,
fence.
yeah, privacy fence around the entire perimeter of the backyard. There's a lot of stuff in the backyard. I can't tell exactly what's back there, but there's a playhouse and some other things that are visible from the road. In addition to, you really can't get a good gauge of what is actually behind that fence or the power line that we're talking about. You really can't see. The front yard obviously is very full of kids' stuff. There's a lot there for kids in the front yard. There is a pool that is currently there. As you mentioned, the picture is from 2019, but there is a pool. When the applicant talks about installation of a pool, are they talking about that particular pool, or do we know? Because the pool itself is what, 3 foot high maybe at the most? It's an inflatable pool.
42-inch maybe.
So is that what we're discussing? Is that the pool that's in question?
Correct, that is the pool.
Okay.
It was a soft-sided, hard frame pool.
Okay.
There was a filter and stuff attached to it.
Okay, I didn't see that part, yeah.
That raises a question, if I might ask. We don't know the exact dimensions, was it about 36 inches tall?
Yeah,
And
approximately.
diameter being 12 feet?
15 feet, yeah, as big as the trampoline practically. yeah.
Does an inflatable pool fall within the prescriptions of the zoning ordinance?
It does. All
Okay.
pools, including
Even
ones temporary in
temporaries,
nature.
okay.
It's not,
So removing this pool, if it's what Mr. Hall if removing this pool is simply draining the water and the air, it's, okay. It doesn't appear to be an insurmountable deconstruction as it sits.
Well, it's likely to have a base put under it too, I would think, unless she just puts it on the lawn. I don't know how they work.
that's what I would say happened.
You just put it on the lawn?
Yes, sir.
It seems to me that on a pool, maybe it's an in-ground pool, it wouldn't apply here, but the fence is supposed to be 6 feet tall, and that fence is closer to 4 feet tall. I don't know if that rule applies to above-ground pools or in the ground. If it's in the ground, I know it's a 6-foot fence required.
So people don't fall in.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the application for variance be denied.
I would add one, if we would look on page 2, where we look at number 10. To approve this, essentially, at least I believe it would be inferring or granting them a special privilege that's not allowed under the code, so I just wanted to clarify.
And my motion would include that addition that Mr. Moore just read into the record.
You know, we're still debating this thing, right? What's the deal where, she mentions that her daughter has seizures, and that's why it's gotta be in the front yard. I don't know if that's an exception to.
I guess being, watching the news, and as a lawyer, I would say that's an assertion that's on an application, and we don't have anybody under oath to confirm that, so we really don't know to what extent that condition has been, to the extent of that condition, and that it's been verified.
Well, we do have a motion. Do we have a second?
Motion to deny, right?
Motion to
I'll
deny?
second it.
Okay.
Christopher Ambergy,
Yes.
David Cash,
Yes.
Jerry Heidenreich,
Yes.
Dan Ward,
Abstain.
Todd Moore,
Yes.
Jim Hall.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
So, I got a question for you. What's to be done about the pool that's there now?
Well, tomorrow when I go back to work, we'll write an outcome letter stating that her variance for the pool in the front yard is denied. We will deny her certificate of zoning compliance. And what initially sparked her applying for the certificate of zoning compliance and for this variance was a code enforcement action, and that will continue until she removes the pool.
I do have a question now that that's settled. Is there any time restrictions we can grant a temporary variance? Did you know of?
I think that would probably fall under approving with modifications, but I would prefer to speak to the law department before guiding you in a direction.
Well, thank you. We'll now move forward to case number 822. This is a request by John Sander for approval of an area and dimensional variance for the property located at 6475 Culberson. The property is zoned B2. The variance requested is for construction of a 35-foot pole sign where the development code does not allow for signs over 20 feet tall.
Thank you. So this is our third area and dimensional variance case for today at 6475 Culbertson. Property is zone B2. The variance requested is for a 35-foot tall pole sign where the development code does not allow signs over 20 feet tall. The purpose of the B2 Community Business District, as I've said multiple times tonight, is to provide for areas of the city that will contain a wide variety of commercial and office uses to meet the needs of the city and region that require access to major arterial streets and are in close proximity to major residential neighborhoods. This lot right here, as you guys may have looked, 6475, if you type in Google, brings you up to this hotel. That's not correct. It is this lot right here, highlighted in blue. So the Middletown Development Code, Chapter 1220.08, permanent signs in non-residential districts, limit signs over 20 feet tall. This is based off of the lot frontage width. As you may see, we are in a B2 with a lot of 301 feet or more. So maximum sign area would be 150 feet. Maximum sign height would be 20 feet. Ground-mounted sign within a maximum sign area of 400 square feet is allowed in the O2 district if the sign is located within 850 feet of I-75 right-of-way. That is for O2s, not a B2, but it is similar in the area. If you guys have seen signs and you're wondering why that is, it would be an O2. Here are permitted standards for freestanding signs. Freestanding signs shall either be a pole sign or a ground-mounted sign, a sign that is placed on two posts, which are no more than 2 feet in height to the base of the sign cabinet or sign face, shall be considered a ground-mounted sign for the purposes of this chapter. They are wanting a pole sign. Table 1220-2 establishes the maximum sign area and sign height allowed for freestanding signs in non-residential zoning districts. One freestanding sign of a size and height permitted in Table 1220-2 shall be permitted on each street frontage. All freestanding signs shall be set back a minimum of 10 feet from the right-of-way and from adjacent lot lines and 50 feet from any adjacent lot in a residential zoning district or used solely for residential uses. Pole signs must have a minimum height of 10 feet from the ground to the bottom of the sign face. Landscaping permanent freestanding signs. All permanent freestanding signs shall be located in a landscaped area equal to or larger than total sign area of the applicable sign. Such landscaped area may be an area that fulfills any landscaping requirements of this code. The landscape area shall include all points where sign structural supports attached to the ground. Exposed sign foundations shall be constructed with a finished material such as brick, stone, or wood, or be screened with evergreens to the top of the anchor bolts. Additionally, the applicant, when speaking with the applicant, they've understood this, they've agreed with it. There is no issues with distance to the public right-of-way. It is solely just the maximum sign area. Here's an image provided by the applicant of where they estimate the sign to be, proposing 35 feet tall. This is from, I believe this might be from the Roosevelt Road looking inwards. This is what the sign would look like. how it would be constructed. And this is the style of the layout of the building, including the sign for the new business.
Mr. Metz, I just have one question before we move forward. If you could just go back one slide. One more, too, please. Here, so this would be, there's a number of signs that are within that area. So I just want to make certain that where this is being proposed, this is not actually on Culberson. It's closer to closer to Roosevelt. Is that correct? Is that where it's being proposed there?
Well,
From the rendering, sometimes it could be seen a couple different ways, so I just want...
absolutely, and that's a great question. I think that would be a better question for the applicant. From my understanding, it would be on their property, and I believe it is on the other side of Culberson, but the applicant is here, and he would be able to speak better to that.
Is it appears this is applications being made because of the topography of that apparently a natural culvert or swale in there? How deep is that? Is it, if 20 foot's the maximum that's allowable if the ground's flat, is it a 15-foot depression? Do you know? If you don't, the applicant might.
The applicant might know.
Okay.
I think they said something that they wanted to reference to the highway.
Okay, any other questions from Mr. Metz before we open the public hearing? Okay. All right, we'll now open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak in favor, please come forward. Mr. Cash will swear you in.
Wasn't sure. I wasn't sure you weren't getting ready to go. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give before this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. Thanks.
Sorry, faked out.
Well, that's all right. You did. Everybody was silent there until you made a turn.
Well, I have to ask you first, looks like that's a Starbucks sign, is that?
It may or may not be.
Oh, okay.
I'm John Sander, by the way, the applicant. From Insight Real Estate, we're a national development firm out of Chicagoland. Have a few national clients, one that we've alluded to, and they're really interested in the site. And they're the ones pushing for the larger sign. We look at a lot of these sites that are, off highway exits, big towns, small towns, but any additional visibility that they can have from both whatever the main city drag is as well as the highway is obviously beneficial to their business and something that they always like us to look into. In looking at this site, as Mr. Metz has described, we had some conversations with staff knowing what the restrictions were. I did a site visit, took some photos, tried to get a feel for the area, understanding that there are a lot of large signs in the area that may or may not be to code at this point in time. And so I understand the new code's been passed. We're trying to meet it as much as we can, but still want to look out for the best interest of our client regarding the signage height. When I was out there, I tried to, again, just gauge from building heights and eye levels what the heights of the signs were out there. If I could ask for a 100-foot pylon, I would, but I don't think anyone would agree with that. I didn't want to waste anyone's time. I thought looking at the other ones in the area, 35 feet seemed to be an adequate ask. I didn't think it was anything crazy. And in your packet, as Mr. Metz has shown you, there's a site plan, there's a proposed rendering that I put together, as well as preliminary plans for a sign that we got approved on another site. I want to say also in Ohio, but again, we do a lot of these, so. I'm claiming and asking for this variance in regards to topographic conditions, as mentioned, when I was on site. And if anyone goes on to Culbertson Road, they'll realize that Culbertson sits about 10, maybe 15 feet lower than Roosevelt. I don't know if all of these photos were presented to you in your packet or not, but I took a few photos just from chest level, trying to gauge, and I'm 5'6", right? So 5 feet tall. Then looking at the berm up to Roosevelt, about another 5 feet. And basically the whole site sits lower than Roosevelt. It's all well and good to put a sign up, but if it's even level with the adjacent roadway, I feel like it serves little to no purpose. And so that's my rationale for asking for that extra 15 feet above the 20 that's allowed. That would give better visibility from Roosevelt as well as better visibility from the highway and from the exit as you're coming off and entering into the town. And as mentioned already, there are several large pylon signs and monument signs in the area. I don't believe that this request is exorbitant. I think it would still fit the nature of the area. It would not be detrimental to the nature of the area, and nor would it negatively impact any utilities or public service or maintenance of anything of that kind. But I'm here if anyone has questions.
I actually drove the site, and I believe what you presented is very fair, and I appreciate the reasonableness of the request. Personally, I think that you have, it does seem like that there is that berm there that comes off. I don't know if that's a correct term or not, but it does slope probably 10 or 15 feet there from Culberson. Tried to get a good read where that sign would be located, but I can definitely see where you could make the argument about it being.
And I can clarify that question from earlier too. The sign would be on our site, just south of Culbertson Road. And the site is a couple feet, just in transparency, a couple feet higher than Culbertson, but not near the 15 feet we're talking about up to Roosevelt.
Yes, sir.
You want to
Go
go?
ahead. No, go ahead.
In your research for the business site, are you expecting or can you get signage actually on the highway itself that says if it's Starbucks or something that it exit here or something? Because you got the hotels and gas stations and other things there.
Again,
Do they do that?
for transparency, we leave that to them. We let corporate handle that, and we're more focused on the actual site development.
Actually, we had this come up. Are you talking about the blue signs on the highway?
Yeah, something like that.
Well, those blue signs are leased. If you remember, we had a Waffle House application down on Cincinnati Dayton Road, and the way that ODOT works those lease or those blue signs to get you to gas and lodging and food, they lease those, and you've got them as long as you continue to lease them, and you're all locked out if you want to get one of those signs, unless somebody lets their lease expire.
And that's been my experience with other clients as well. We try to do them for
They
Walmart.
came up in that Waffle House, because that was, we thought that's Waffle House signs, nobody's ever going to see it.
I have, the rendering here of the sign, I can't tell for certain, is it to the north of Culbertson?
No, it'll be
To the
south.
south?
It'll be to the south.
Okay. Does your sign conflict at all with the power lines that run over on the south side there?
No, it will not. We'll put them also south of those power lines, away from any obstructions.
I went to the site also, and I looked at it. Signs are very important, extremely important to commercial business as well as retail. And they should be handled with great care and professionalism. That sign out there is one of the worst signs I've ever seen.
The existing one?
It has not been maintained for years. You have on that sign, Woodland Realty. They haven't been in business for over a year. They really are against Ohio State real estate law to have their name up as Woodland Realtors on that sign. The area is just trashy looking. If you were going to put that same sign up 35 feet, that would just be horrible. I don't think the intent is that.
It is not.
But if you put up a sign, it should be one that really does something, not distracts. That's all I have to say.
Well, any other questions for the applicant? Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition to the proposed variance? Please come forward. All right, hearing none, close the public hearing and deliberate.
I got a question on this, and that is if you put a Starbucks out there, we're gonna increase the traffic flow to get back to that area, because every Starbucks I've ever seen is pretty busy. It's almost like a Chick-fil-A, which is ridiculous as far as busy is concerned. But the question I have is, it's difficult to get to that lot. If you're a new person and looking to get back there, I mean, the people that live in town and stuff understand how to get there. But I'm just concerned about traffic flow at the turn that joins the head at the what's the street out there where Lowe's and stuff's on?
Town Boulevard.
Yeah, that's just a concern on traffic flow. No matter what business we get there, we're gonna have additional traffic flow, but that's going to draw people that are really from the highway. That's what we want for them business. Is there any way from a city standpoint we have to put either a signage or something up there to help, or maybe it's just me being too much of a little old man here to figure out what the heck the problem is, but it just, to me, I've gotten off on trips, and you're looking for how to get there and where it is, even if it's a hotel you're trying to stay at. And this is gonna be awkward for people that, it's right next to the highway, but it's not easy to get to. I'm just throwing that question out, if that's an issue, if we start getting a fairly high volume of traffic down there. I think the traffic flow down there is very slight, but this would change it radically, I believe. But that's all I wanted to say. I don't know what to do to change it, but it's just a concern.
Anyone else? Any other? In terms of hardship, does anyone want to?
Well, I would move that, at this point, since there doesn't appear to be any further discussion, I would move that the variance be granted on the basis that review criteria A1, which deals with specific conditions peculiar to land, exist in this case. Number 4, whether the variance is substantial, but is the minimum necessary to make possible the reasonable use of the land. And again, number 9, that the spirit and intent behind the code requirement would be observed by granting this variance. So I move that the variance be granted based upon those 3 criteria.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Mr. Metz, when you're ready, call the roll.
Jim Hall,
Yes.
Todd Moore,
Yes.
Dan Ward,
Yes.
Jerry Heidenreich,
Yes.
David Cash,
Yes.
Christopher Ambergy.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. We will now move. This is case 922. Okay. Variance case 922, a request by applicant John Price for the approval of a use variance for the property located at 409 Crawford Street. The property is zone B2. The variance requested is for a transitional housing facility, and while transitional housing facility is not permitted within the B2 zoning district.
Thank you. So variance case 922 is a use variance by applicant John Price for a transitional housing at 409 Crawford Street. The purpose of the B2 Community Business District is to provide for areas of the city that will contain a wide variety of commercial and office uses to meet the needs of the city and region that require access to major arterial streets and are in close proximity to major residential neighborhoods. As you see where the arrow is pointing, that is the location, this building right here. The Middletown Development Code, Chapter 1204.08, permitted principal uses prohibits transitional housing within the B2 zoning district. That can be seen here, transitional housing, and B2 is XX, not permitted. Previously, this property, as of March 16th, 2021, was originally a rooming house. That was a legal non-conforming use. That also was not permitted, but as a legal non-conforming use, it was grandfathered in. To the best of our knowledge, it has not been a rooming house since then. It's been under construction and renovation. Definition of the transitional housing: a temporary housing arrangement designed to assist persons to obtain skills, financial wherewithal, and/or the physical, psychological, and emotional stability necessary for independent living and permanent housing in a community. Transitional housing is housing in which an organization provides a program of therapy, counseling, supervision, and/or training for the occupants. The organization operating the program may or may not be licensed or authorized by a governmental authority, and the program is for the purpose of assisting the occupants in one or more of the following types of care: protection from abuse and neglect, developing skills and the personal stability that is necessary to adjust to life in the community, and treatment of the effects of substance abuse, even if under criminal justice supervision. The definition of transitional housing includes the terms halfway house, safe house, temporary care home, and other similar uses. The definition of transitional housing does not include the terms group home as defined in the code or other similar permanent group living facilities. I just would like to reiterate, this is what they're applying for, was a transitional housing. And this is an organization that provides a program of therapy, counseling, supervision, or training for the occupants. The legal nonconforming use that was permitted up until March of 2021. Legal nonconforming uses lose their legal nonconforming use if it has not been consistently used for a period of time greater than 1 year. March of 2021 is a period of time greater than 1 year. The definition of a rooming house is a private dwelling unit where rooms are leased out to unrelated individuals with a shared kitchen and bathroom facilities. The application denied permit. The application, this is the application of certificate of zoning compliance from the applicant, City of Refuge and One Way Farm. This, and I provided this to you today, and it's also in the staff packet, I believe, states a very small occupancy of 5 to 10 older teens in what is going to be used as a transition house to see them leave our facility and moving out on their own. The use will be as it was before, people in and out with a very small occupancy, including 24-hour-a-day adult supervision. This Leeds house here will be our better behaved and will be attending Marshall High School. The applicant states on the application that it will be the same use as before. I believe in the previous two slides I kind of described the difference between a transitional house and a rooming house. That was denied on 6/09/22, so June 9th. You can see that as the certificate of zoning compliance to the right. Per the Middletown Development Code, the requirement for legal notice for variance requests, meeting notice letters for the proposed variances were sent to all property owners contiguous and directly across the street or public right-of-way, and no comments were received. Per the Middletown Development Code, the purpose of a variance is to provide limited relief from the requirements of the code in those cases where strict application of a particular requirement will create a practical difficulty or unnecessary hardship prohibiting the use of land in a manner otherwise allowed under this code. It is not intended that a variance be granted merely to remove inconveniences or financial burdens that the requirements of this code may impose of property owners in general. Variances are not intended to address extraordinary, exceptional, or unique situations that were not caused by the applicant's act or omission. In order to grant a use variance, the BZA shall determine that strict compliance with the terms of this code will result in unnecessary hardship to the applicant. The applicant must demonstrate such hardship by clear and convincing evidence that all the following criteria are satisfied. A, the property cannot be put in economically viable use under any of the permitted uses in the zoning district in which the property is located. B, The variance requested stems from a condition which is unique to the property at issue and not ordinarily found in the same zone or district. C, the variance requested cannot otherwise be resolved by a zoning map amendment, or a zoning map amendment is not the most beneficial approach. D, the essential character of the neighborhood will not be substantially altered as a result of the variance. E, there is an existing structure that cannot be reasonably used for a permitted use or a conditionally permitted use in the applicable zoning district. The proposed use is listed in table 1204-3. The hardship condition, G, the hardship condition is not created by actions of the applicant. H, the granting of the variance will not adversely affect the rights of the adjacent property owners or residents. I, the granting of the variance will not adversely affect the public health, safety, or general welfare. Any person or entity claiming to be injured or aggrieved by any final action of the Board of Zoning Appeals has the right to appeal the decision to the Court of Common Pleas as provided in the Ohio Revised Code chapters 2505 and 2506.
Thank you, Mr. Metz. A couple questions. Not sure if this is going to be better suited to the applicant, or maybe you can answer these, but you did deny if you go back to the slide where you denied, I think that was trying to get the timeline here where you denied the applicant. I know that they purchased, in the application itself, they said that they purchased the property for $200,000 and that they were making renovations to the property itself. Trying to understand from purchase date to where they come to ask to be able to do this, could you give us some background in terms of how you arrived at your denial and what's the timeline you're talking about from purchase to where we're actually denying where the city denied?
Absolutely. So, as far as I'm aware, from the zoning department, he may have talked to more people or may not have. But as far as I'm aware of, the water was switched over in March 16th, 2021 to the one-way farm from the previous owner of Tim Bailey. So at that point in time, that is when we, the city, would determine this is when your clock for the legal non-conforming use of a rooming house starts. It's 1 year from that.
Please repeat that date again.
I'm sorry, could you say that one more time?
Repeat the date again, please.
March 16th, 2021 was when the water was switched over. And that's for, once again, the previous use was for a rooming house, which if you guys did want to grant in a different situation, a rooming house, if the applicant would to choose that, that would be on you, but that was the use previously, and we've kind of determined that the use they're asking for in the application and what they've stated is transitional housing. So that is the earliest that we have, that we know the property owner, the applicant, took control of the property. And then on June 7th, the applicant completed a certificate of zoning compliance. We received it on June 7th, and then on June 9th of this year, I denied the application based off of the development code.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Metz, the rooming house which was in there before and terminated, I guess, ownership on March 16th, how long had that rooming house been operated, and was it being operated under, in compliance with the zoning code, or was it the product of a variance, if you know?
I don't know. As far back as 2011, it was used as a rooming house, and it could have been used as a rooming house previous to that. Our online files, as far back as I have, is 2011, and most of those were violations, code violations.
But in B2, a rooming house is a permitted use.
Correct. In a previous iteration of the development code, I believe the area wasn't a B2. I believe that it was eventually switched over, and that was in 2018. So well before the purchase of the property.
Any other questions from Mr. Metz before we open the public hearing? Okay, we'll now open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of the proposed variance, please come forward. Mr. Cassius,
Sir, do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give before this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
My name is John Rice. Appreciate your time. Just one clarification, actually a couple. When we purchased the building in March of 2021, there were tenants in there for many months after that. We had to actually go to court in a course of time later in the fall or early winter because they were continuing to damage the property. And most people are probably familiar with that portion of Crawford Street, and I think the elements that we had in there was probably the worst in the city. When I went in, there was constant needles, constant drugs. The police were called repeatedly to the property. But so we let them stay mainly because the people that had come to that property had come from a homeless shelter. And the original owner had a contract with the homeless shelter where they would pay like the first 3 months rent for them to come into the property. And then after that, hopefully they would be on their feet and be able to sustain some kind of rent. And Mr. Bailey had gave us figures, and we really had considered leaving it as it was for a little bit longer period of time, but the figures that he gave us was not realistic. Nobody hardly paid rent. And so we just left them in there for a period of time because we wasn't ready financially to begin the construction on the property. And the picture that we had up there was original. I don't know where all of those bikes came from because there never was a lot of small kids, when we got into the facility that was there. But what we do, and we are the One Way Farm Children's Home in Fairfield, Ohio. We've been there for 41 years. We're a state licensed facility. We have state licensed workers, caregivers that are in the home. And what really caused us to move into the area of a property like this was when kids age out or they come to 18 or close to it, a lot of times that we found the county just pulls funding for the kids. And we had an 18-year-old girl that had no family, no place to go. I called the county because they had totally emancipated her and she was not allowed to stay at our facility. So I said, what do we do with her? And I was stunned. They says, call a cab, send her to a homeless shelter. Well, we've got attached to the kids by then, and that's just not an option. So we put her in another facility for a couple months until she could find, suitable housing. A lot of our kids, and I've got two of the young men from our facility with us today. Hayden will be 18 in about 3 months. Next month he'll be 18. And then James, it'll be sometime after that. But these are two of the older men. And what our plan was for this facility and why I never really thought we would have to be here is after we had actually started moving people out, started doing some inside renovations, which was painting, carpet, all of that. If you went through the property now, it don't even resemble what it once was. But Larry Tuttle had called me on my cell and he asked me, he says, what are you planning on doing with the property? Because it had been such a problem for the community. And I told him, and of course I didn't get it in writing, but Larry told me, he says it would absolutely be approved for that function. This was originally approved, and the tax department has it listed as a 419C, other commercial housing. And where I was looking at this sort of as a continuation of a boarding house is because the majority of the kids that we have are going to be close to 18 or older than 18. So many will be in there. Hayden would be in there as an adult. But when we had this from the auditor's office, and I called the auditor's office directly and asked, because this is not something we had been involved with before other than the original site in Fairfield. So I called the auditor's office here in Middletown and told them what we was planning on doing with the property, and they said they could not see a problem, but said obviously they're not the zoning department. But I just wrote down just a few notes because I want you guys to understand what our thought process is here.
May I ask you a question before?
My name is Rice too, but
Rice.
There's no problem.
So is that incorrect on the application then?
What's that?
It says John Price as property owner.
It just probably my writing may not be.
signature appears to be Rice. It
Yeah.
looks like a typo.
Sorry about
Yeah.
that, I apologize. Now, are you, I didn't look at the one, I did look at the One Way Farm. Are you associated, or are you ownership in One Way
I'm the
Farm?
president of the One Way Farm.
You're president of the One Way Farm.
Yes, sir.
My question to you is, when you were looking for a location for these young men, why did you choose Crawford Street, 409?
The reason why I chose Crawford Street is we had a manager that at the time that was helping us there and at our thrift store in Hamilton. He drove all around the area looking for a property. We needed something really unique. And
What
we
makes
really
that
need-
particular property unique to you?
Well, it has got 9 different small apartments in it. You know, what our plan was is for each one of the older kids to have their own unit, and then there is a connecting 2-bedroom large apartment that was going to be a common area, you know, where they watch TV together, they have supper, breakfast meals together. And so this fit everything that we was looking for. We had no idea that we would even be able to afford something like that because, you know, obviously property values in Fairfield are through the roof and a lot of Middletown. So when we saw this on the street, we knew that Crawford Street wasn't a perfect area, you know. But in the meantime, the church next door to this property, I think, is under a demolition, is going to be coming down. And we also own the property on the other side of this building. And there's only 2 other houses that I know of that are occupied on either side on that whole block. You know, there's several properties that are empty, and then we own one of the lots across the street from the building for parking. And then, you know, the other ones are owned by the city, I guess, for tax properties. But the main reason we looked there, he found it, and it fits so perfectly with what we was looking for, because we don't want this to be a large venue, because, you know, there may be times there's only 2 or 3 kids in the property at a time. But according to our state license, we have to have 24-hour approved staffing. And all of that, but it was just mainly a price. We purchased the property for $110,000, and there's no place in a 4-county area that you could get, even though they're not large units, that you could get 9 units, you know, for that price range. And then our people that help fund the One Way Farm and have for years, we put a notice in our mailer, and they actually sent in donations and paid the property off. And the $200,000 was not for the property; that was including the renovations and everything, you know, besides the original purchase of the property. We've went in, and like I said, I've got pictures. My phone is about dead. I don't know if they would serve any good, but the building itself. Whenever we called to have the fire inspection, because before we even look at a state application, we have to have the fire approval and all of that. And when he came out, then Mr. Tuttle came out with the fire inspector, and he took a look through there, and he said, John, he says, this was primarily a boarding house. And he says, I don't know that it's a problem, but said you probably need to at least stop down and talk to zoning. We never really thought we had an issue with it. And so that's whenever I stopped down. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, the first individual we talked to at zoning was no longer with the department, and then we developed another conversation, you know, with the other gentleman. But
Along the way,
okay.
as you continued to move towards the site, was it brought to your attention that the zoning code was updated in 2018 and that
No,
there would
sir.
be something that would be
No, sir.
changing there?
No, matter of fact, like I said, the phone call, I'm a pastor as well. I mean, I'd sell the property before I'd lie about it. But like I said, when the head zoning, when Mr. Tuttle called me and told me, he says he was concerned because of how bad of a facility that it had been. And whenever I told him what we was going to do with 24-hour care, you know, his words was, he says, it'll positively be approved for that. So I never considered that a problem until he came back out the second time. And then when he actually took a tour of the building, and then when he told me, he says, I don't know that you've got a problem, but he said, I would at least open that venue. And then I had the other paper from, I guess, the auditor's office showing that it already was approved for other commercial housing. And, you know, I mean, that's just what we went from, yeah.
Did you, just curiosity here, but as you were looking, did you look at any other properties in Middletown or?
I did
any
not.
other properties? And
This one just fit so
you
perfect.
mentioned that you actually own a couple properties in that location.
No, just the one next door. Well, we have a contract on it. It's just going to be a rental property next door, but we just wanted a buffer between our building and the same Mr. Tim, whatever his name, you know, owned that property too. So that's the only other property that I don't own it personally. The corporation does.
Mr. Rice, let me ask you something. We've heard from Mr. Metz that the deed transferred on March 16th of 21. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that should be accurate.
When you assumed ownership of that property, you're telling us, I think, that the operation was ongoing at that point in time as
Yes.
you were the owners?
Yeah.
Did you not close it down, considering the potential liability you might have or any of the consequences of you owning property where people are now in a rooming house situation?
We had no idea what was going on in that property.
Well, I understand that, but you bought property.
Right.
Didn't someone come into that property over on Crawford and say, guys, we own it now, you gotta go? Or did you just kind of?
We tried. What we did is we did tell them what we was going to do with the property. Some of the people absolutely refused.
Were they paying you? Were they paying? Because
What-
rooming house, as you looked at the definition, a rooming house is for people where they pay to come and go.
There was a handful of people that did monthly. Like there was like 9 tenants in the property. The one apartment that was the big 2-bedroom apartment upstairs, he paid for like 3 or 4 months afterwards.
So when you bought the property from whom?
Tim,
I don't know.
Tim Bailey, yes.
When you bought it from Tim Bailey, one of the conditions of the purchase wasn't that the property be vacated?
No. Matter of fact, the part of the purchase is that we would move these people out gradually because these were homeless people that had no place to go. We got down to late fall of last year, and what we were doing, we were gradually moving out one tenant at a time. We told all of them. We put notices on all.
Let me ask you this. I understand what you're telling me happened.
Right.
But as the owner at that point in time of some type of a housing facility or a rooming facility, are there reporting requirements that you have to various governmental entities that this rooming house is an ongoing an operation?
Not that we was aware.
Not that you're aware.
No.
And your operation, clearly, you have to report to governmental entities in order for licensure and certification, obviously.
Right. But like I said, what our goal was when we purchased the property, we didn't have the money at that time set aside to do the renovations. So it was going to take a period of time for us to have it. My thinking was, if it's convoluted or even if it's wrong, well, if we can continue to get a little income from it in the meantime, that's what we would do. But we did put notices on all of the doors telling the people that we were eventually going to be vacating and please find other places. The last 3 people that was in there would not, and actually stole some of our equipment and put it on sale on eBay. And somebody called me and told me, said, there's a wonderful table for sale on eBay. Said, why don't you look at it? And I looked at it, and it was a joke. It was ours. It was from one of the rooms that we had kind of fixed up as a kind of a template. And so with that said, we went ahead and filed eviction notices on the last 3 tenants.
You've seen the definition that Mr. Metz showed of what a rooming house is versus transitional living. Does your anticipated use of this property fall within that? Do you believe it falls within that definition of transitional living? Transitional housing?
Well, what I don't understand, like I said, most of our kids are going to be adults when they move in there. So to me, that would be a rooming house continuing. It's just, I don't know all of the semantics on it.
Those definitions were up. The code's real clear when it defines both of those uses and you can see the distinctions between them.
Well, I know this. I know the condition of Crawford Street, and when I talked to Mr. Tuttle, I said probably when we moved the groups out that was in there, every home in the neighborhood shot up $10,000. This was the worst of the worst facility that's in the city of Middletown. And so, like I said, if you went through there now, there's new carpet on the floor, the walls are painted, our thrift stores furnished furniture for all of the apartments. And it's just very...
Interrupt you just for a moment, because first let me say that I appreciate the work that you're doing, and I appreciate the young men that are here tonight. One of the difficulties, as Mr. Cash is, I think, explaining to you, is that there is very much a distinction between saying that you would lease this to adults and having that be that's a separate definition.
Yes,
We're
sir.
talking about young men that are 16 and a half to 18,
Right.
which falls within the definition of transitional housing. We have to decide whether or not we issue a use variance on this, okay? So it puts us in an awkward position, because even if we can appreciate the work that you're doing, what you're asking is not permitted in the current code. And it certainly, I guess what I'm saying is you're asking us to approve something that that is not permitted at this time. And the second point that I'm really struggling with is how is this suitable as a transitional housing facility, whether or not this is actually a suitable site for young men.
Well, the issue is it is staffed 24 hours a day.
I recognize that, but we're talking about young men, 16 years old, that are going to be going out into the world, and you have another means of using this facility if it's not approved. You have well, you do. You could lease it to others. You could have 9 apartments there. You can do things post.
But they have common bathrooms and all of that, so the only kind of element that's going to want to go back into that property is the kind that was in there before. I mean, it's just not something that you or I would live in. There is no individual bathrooms. There's 3 showers downstairs. There's 1 shower upstairs. It's just not going to be usable for anything feasible other than putting back in, maybe some kind of, because we've had the same company calling us repeatedly. We have got a list of people that wanted to move in there, but I just am not equipped to deal with that element.
Right, but the question, though, again, is we have to determine whether or not we would issue a use variance. Those definitions have meaning. There's intent. I think Mr. Cash tried to raise a question with you about, in the timeline, did you reach out to staff? Did you share your intent that this is going to be a transitional housing facility? I'm hearing a lot of assumptions that were made, but I don't see a lot of steps that were taken in terms of, having this plan in place, saying, here's what we're going to do, here's what we're going to invest, here's what we're moving forward.
Our plan was for, whether it was called transitional housing, I don't know if that's the best term, maybe it is, but our plan from the very beginning was a continuation of the children's. We've got about a $2 million piece of property there in Fairfield. It's secluded. But our plan from the very beginning was to move kids there that have no family, they have no place to go. And it's either that or they're in a homeless shelter somewhere, And so I guess, if we err on caring. But I just, we had thought from the phone call with Mr. Tuttle, I am a licensed HVAC contractor and have been for years. I've worked with building regulations for 30 years. So, I've had a very good relationship with a lot of building inspectors and that sort of thing. So I had no reason to really question it at the moment. I just went from the phone conversation, and like I said, then knowing that we had no interest in using the property as it was currently used when we bought it. But like I said, the last 3 tenants that moved out, we paid their rent and deposit for their new facility just to get them out of the property because they were damaging it so tremendously.
I got a question.
Oh, yes, sir.
I think you want to do a remarkable job for the young men, and coming out of foster care and transitioning from that to adulthood, going to Marshall High School.
Right.
So would you be developing skills and personal stability that is necessary to adjust to life in the community?
Sure. Sure.
That's the definition of transitional housing.
Well, what they're doing is obviously these kids, Hayden, like I said, he'll be 18 in 2 months. Obviously, legally, he could do what? Next month, I'm sorry. Legally, at 18, he could go or any place he wants to go. His mother's living in Florida. Hayden just, like I said, he's been with us almost 2.5 years. His county called us, and they have been to the property and looked at it and said, if you can get him into the house, as we have funds set aside to purchase an automobile, different things for him as he turns 18. But our interest is some of the kids are a little stunted on learning, so an 18-year-old may not graduate till he's 19. Technically, he's legal, but our goal is to see them complete their education, and so on. So it is our, like I said, just our interest in having something. And like I said, there's hardly any other, there's 2 other people that live on that entire block on either side. And like I said, with this building there, we abide by every form of state law. We are inspected repeatedly by the state with every facet of what we do. But like I said, the confusion on my part was the phone call with Larry. And then, like I said, I did pull this from the auditor's office that showed it was approved for the other commercial housing. I'm not a housing attorney. There's a lot of things that I don't know, but like I said, we did seek to try to do something that would make that, if you saw the building now, the outside's got new vinyl siding on the front, the carpeting on the porch, a lot of different things have been done to dress up the neighborhood, and we've had a lot of comments from people. They're in the neighborhood, glad to see something was being done to rectify an eyesore. About the only thing that could have been done with that building is leave the homeless in it or tear it down, and the homeless was not an option for us.
I've got a few questions.
Okay.
I know you've been working on the facility. I happen to have the occasion to be in that building once before years ago, and it was as you defined it,
Horrible.
It was terrible. And so whatever you've done, I'm sure you've improved it. I'm concerned with the people you're going to move in. How do you select those people? And you've said about their need, but what about their background?
Well,
Because you're putting 9 people that don't know each other potentially into a facility, and a guy next door, how does that flow?
well, at our facility in Fairfield, we have 20. We have 2 bungalows with 10 with kids in each one. Like I said, the kids that come here are going to be the kids that have excelled in our program, that has done very well. Like I said, Hayden's been with us 2.5 years. We know him. And so like I said, we're not just putting just any kid that comes to our facility in the building. We are definitely looking at those that have behavior qualifications, those who have done well with us. And that's why I said at times, there may only be 2 or 3 kids that are in the building at a time. The maximum that it was approved for was 10, and I can't ever see us having quite that many, in the property.
How long do you anticipate the average person, adult or child, to stay in this facility?
Well, Hayden, like I said, he'll be 18 in a month, but he does have 1 more year of high school. He's wanting to go to Marshall if we can get him moved here. And Marshall kind of has an expedited program, and then they also have the technical application where they can leave with a trade. So, we don't want them there any longer than they have to be, but we don't want a hard drop for them just, to have to leave our facility with no place to go either.
Well, and that's all great. I mean, you're doing a fine job for these young men. It's a real good service you're doing. Well, the supervisor or the approved supervisor, what qualifications makes a person approved to manage?
Work there. Well, the state runs like 3 different levels of background check. There's an FBI check. There's a local law enforcement check. If they've lived in another state within the past 3 years, or 5 years, I think it is, we have to go to that state, do a background check. And with our type of work, they can have no felonies. They can have, it has to be a stellar background. We do have 3 nurses on staff. We do have a licensed social worker on staff. We have the professionals. And then if our kids require any kind of counseling, they're still working with Access. Here in Middletown already, the kids come to Access for their counseling now.
Well, as you stated earlier, you picked a rough neighborhood to take on this task. So you'll be exposing these people to that rough neighborhood. You can do everything you want inside your facility, but outside your facility, you are kind of at a handicap in what's around.
But all of these kids are in the public school system, and they are exposed to identically the same stuff on a daily basis. That's why every kid that is in this property is going to be drug tested once a week by our nurse. And if there ever is a hint of drugs, then that eliminates their stay. There's a long list of criteria that we have for the kids to be there. But we've had kids from our farm that was younger. They had drugs on the school bus. It's just out there, and the kids are going to have to function. Some of them are probably not going to live in a mansion. If they can just get a good job in an area, they may be living, in the area there. But they're going to have to come to the grips. And like I said, with Hayden has never had a drug issue, never. In the history that he's been with us. He has a lot of admirable qualities. And so we're not foolish enough to jeopardize the work that we're doing in Fairfield, to put someone in here just to occupy a bed. These kids have to jump through a lot of hoops to be able to get into the facility. It's what our interest is.
I'll ask you, do they have bus service to go to the high school from there?
I was actually thinking about that.
Marshall does.
I believe so.
I talked to Marshall. Marshall has worked. We've had one boy that we've drove back and forth from Fairfield this year, but Marshall said that they would pick up right at the front door and then drop them back off, at the end. Marshall has a half-a-day program and then a full-day program. And so that has already been worked out. We also have a driver that's all that he does all week long is he drives kids if they have to go to a job interview or a doctor's appointment or, whatever the case is. We have a driver that does that as well.
Does your organization bring food in?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you take care of the...
We take care of what we have. If you saw the large apartment there, in the kitchen area, there's a very large kitchen. We've got a large table. They have family-style meals. All of that's provided for them. We have a laundry in the basement, for their laundry, all of that. Someone did just steal both of the air conditioners there, so we're in the process of new cooling.
Mr. Price, if I could just stop you right there for a moment. That someone stole both the air conditioners. Now, I want to share some of my personal background with you for a moment because I think it's relevant to what we're talking about. So, in my work life, I work in the nonprofit sector. I'm very familiar with transitional housing, reentry services. I've done things across the state of Ohio, but primarily worked in the Cincinnati and Dayton area. I'm very familiar with the location, particularly, of these types of transitional housing facilities. I can't think of any, not even over the Rhine, where I've personally been involved in some of the work and outreach in that area, where I've seen a worse facility than I do Crawford Avenue. That's the struggle that I have. We're talking about young men that are 16 to 18 years old. That's what you're proposing.
Right.
And the problem is, you're saying, the air conditions are getting stolen, those sorts of things. Even folks that are coming out of the Talbert House in Cincinnati that are placed in areas over the Rhine are not in an area that is bad as 409 Crawford Avenue. But you're asking us to propose, changing a use variance to accommodate what you want to do. What you want to do is admirable. I fully support it.
Right.
Okay? I have nothing but love and respect for what you're doing. but the location and whether or not that's suitable for children
Right.
that meets a definition of transitional housing. I mean, again, I'm being very honest with you. I cannot, by analogy, as I prepared for this case, I can't think of any place that I've been, Dayton, Trotwood, Cincinnati, over the Rhine, any place that is really proposed worse than what you have at 409.
Well,
Most facilities and most nonprofits would not place this type of facility in that type of location.
well, there's two issues there, though. Obviously, I mean, cost is a factor, but I have worked with the state of Ohio on numerous similar facilities on the west side of Dayton, which is every bit as bad as Crawford Street, you know? I know the addresses of the properties. And the state has been through the property at 3 different levels. They have totally inspected it. The state has approved the facility. And all of this is subject
Transitional
to.
housing, is that what you're,
I'm sorry?
for transitional
Yes, sir.
housing, what you're proposing here?
I had a phone call from Claremont County today wanting to place a child, or actually that's Hayden's County.
At 409 Crawford Street.
409, they've been to 409 Crawford. They met us, they walked through the property. They looked at everything. The state of Ohio, our licensing agent, has came through on 2 different locations and was very impressed with the property. They just, like I said, they're not going to license us. We have to, I mean, you could say, hey, yeah, you can move in there tomorrow, but until we get the license from the state of Ohio, you know, which is, we should have tomorrow or the next day. The state has been there on 2 different levels and has approved the property. But most of these kids have come from similar neighborhoods. You know, there's family problems. They've come from rough neighborhoods. They've seen, and like I said, we've tried to instill within them qualities, characteristic, and our kids, you know, we've had some that have came to us. We just went back to the state and says they're not a fit here. You know, their issues are too great for us at our facility, and we've had to move them out. We moved one girl out that was 17, and she went on Google and gave us a 5-star rating after she left. But, you know, the thing is with the kids that are coming in, like I said, they haven't lived in Centerville or Oakwood or, you know, this is many times, you know, from a trailer park or somewhere that has been rough. And so when the kids have came into this facility, they've been very excited with it. We stopped and took a tour of it because Hayden had never been into the property until today. I wouldn't put 16-year-old kids in the best part of Middletown in a house by themselves, but our staff is awake 24 hours a day. We have 3 shifts awake 24 hours a day that is watching and monitoring the kids. But if this doesn't go into Crawford, I don't know any other use that there is for the building, because like I said, the people that was in there didn't pay their rent. You know, if a person's going to buy the building as a landlord, you know, he certainly isn't going to get a return on his investment.
I want to bring this full circle again. Chairman Moore, what you said had to be said. I agree with you 100%. But this is about a use variance in a B2 district for transitional living, which is not allowed. In 2018, the code was changed to a B2. It was purchased 3/16/2021, correct?
I think that's around when we closed on it. Yes, sir.
And you had intentions to use this for a transitional living.
Yes, sir.
So why didn't you do your due diligence and see what the zoning was for that?
Well, friend, I can promise you, I'm not a foolish person. Before here, I ran a multi-million-dollar HVAC corporation. Whenever Larry Tuttle called me on my cell phone and told me, he says, these are his words. You know, you may ask him and get a different story. But his word was to me, you will 100% be approved.
Okay.
I didn't even know how Larry Tuttle got my cell phone, but he did.
Okay, you talked to Larry Tuttle,
Yes,
which
sir.
he's in the building department.
Yes, sir.
And you mentioned something about an auditor. Would that be the county auditor?
Well, I've got it here.
Is it county auditors you're talking about?
I'm not sure. I would think so.
Okay. Did it ever cross your mind to call the zoning department?
No, it didn't.
So you didn't do your due diligence?
Well, it's not that I didn't want to. Like I said, it's not that I was opposed to it. But I have worked with building inspectors for years.
Well, building inspectors are different than zoning.
But I've never been in a situation with a property like this before. The one that we bought there in Fairfield had been a children's home for years.
Yeah, I said I want to bring this full circle.
I get it.
Because this is about a use change in a B2. I mean, we can talk about what a great job you're doing and everything, talk about the neighborhoods.
I'm not worried about that.
But the bottom line is, you want a use variance that's not allowed.
Okay, but if we took the kids to the age of 18 and we just rented them a room, then it would be allowed.
Correct.
Right.
But you can't do that.
Well, I can in a month.
You can.
But that's not the case. Like I said, I pastor a church. I try to be very upfront in my business dealings. We're not hard people to work with. Like I said, when I took on, I'm 60 years old. 3 years ago, we took on the one-way farm. It's just been something, it was totally closed. The lady was in her 80s that owned it. It was shut down. It's just something that's been in my heart for years to do. So, but it was a new field for me. Transitional housing is a new field for me. But obviously, these same kids at 18 could rent a house on Crawford Street if they wanted to. So with the 24-hour staffing that we're going to have on the property, like I said, these kids are not coming to us as strangers. If we don't know the kid and we haven't worked with the kid, we're not even reasonably considering it. But we could not afford $1 million property.
Okay.
I think Mr. Hall has asked a great question. I'll
Okay.
follow up on that just for
Okay.
a moment, because I think that really does narrow what we are here to talk about. Suppose this is granted this evening. Share with us what that next few months might look like, and how. So the plan would be, again, that you would be intending to bring young men, 16, 18, which is in the application. That's why I keep
Right.
referencing that age.
Right.
That group would be served at that location throughout the duration of this
That's what our
permit,
plan is.
even if it was conditional at this
Right.
point.
Right.
So that would be your intent moving forward, correct?
Right.
But again, that does meet the definition of transitional housing, as Mr. Hall is trying to point out, which is not.
Well, here I plead ignorance. It's my fault if that's what it is. But when I read other commercial housing and I talked to the building inspector, I just went, I should have searched deeper. There's no question. But like I said, we could not afford $1 million property. Our sponsors were great. They sent in checks, large and small, to pay the building off, and to do the renovations on it. I mean, even if you considered a conditional period of time to give us a trial basis on it, to show you what we can do with the property. But our goal is eventually to buy up the other two houses that would come for sale on that particular block there on Crawford, just as rental property, to where we're more and more removed from.
Transitional.
Yeah.
I got a question, maybe it's for Mr. Metz. The church next door and then this building, once upon a time, were they connected?
Yes.
That's what I thought that they were. So what was the original usage of 409 Crawford? Was it a Sunday school? Was it how did it get broken down into apartments with?
As far back as I have online, we have back to, I believe, to mid-2010, which is when we got our new software. Since then, it's been a rooming house. Previous to that, I do not know the use.
It was part of the church at one time.
Well, that's what we had been told, because someone from the church had actually contacted us on that building.
Many years.
Yeah, but I've been around many years.
I think it definitely was owned by the church, but the way that it's laid out, like I said, there's a full 2-bedroom apartment upstairs in the back. And then the showers are down on the lower level for the other apartments, so I can't imagine what they would have used it for, but
Do we have any other questions from Mr. Rice?
I'd like to make one comment to him, if I may.
yes.
I've listened to every word everybody said, including yourself. You're acting in good faith, I believe. And I would just suggest that, sir, just as Mr. Cash was questioning you, you need a Mr. Cash.
Yeah.
You
we
obviously
needed an
have, if
attorney.
you have a large facility, large
Right.
acreage that you're working with in Fairfield, it seems that you have the relationships necessary and required with the state of Ohio.
We have a very
You
high.
need an
rating.
attorney to help you coordinate. And when you want to do these wonderful things that you
Well-
want to do, ask that attorney.
I can tell you at the
do that?
age of 60, my expansion days are probably about through. I said after this project, I want just a good rest somewhere, because we have worked hard to do it. And like I said, we just were excited because we knew we could not afford $1 million property. And this one appeared to.
I was raised on the laws of God, and
Yes,
I've
sir.
learned the laws of man.
Yeah. Well, we are not trying to conflict. Like I said, we're $200,000 into this property. And even if you considered a temporary variance and gave us a period of time to see what we can do with it, I can tell you.
Violates our code, sir.
I'm sorry?
It violates our code.
Okay, well, I'm there again, ignorant in the matter, so.
I just want to make just one other observation before we close public hearing. That you mentioned that you have intention to buy several properties there. The intention, again, would be to rent those. This is absent transitional housing.
Yes, sir.
You're just
Yes, sir.
looking to rent those
Like the house next door, there's a lady in there on Section 8. And the only reason why we wanted that property is the backyard is larger. And then since the church was being torn down, what our plan would be is to eventually end up, if we could buy reasonably the lot where the church is, just for an empty lot for green space. And like I said, on down on the other side of this house is another property that is occupied, and then I think there's just one on both sides of the block. There's a business right across the street from us, but like I said, very few properties are actually even occupied there on that particular block.
Any other questions? Well, thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to come forward? No one else wishing to speak in favor? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition? Hearing none, I will now close the public hearing and we can have deliberations.
Could I ask Mr. Metz to put back up on the screen the definition of rooming house? Thank you. I guess I would echo what I think Mr. Hall was intimating and saying that the unfortunate thing here is, based on what you've told us, Mr. Rice, it does appear that there would be more control over this property by your certifying agencies and the requirements that you have in this transitional period versus leasing rooms out to individuals that are unrelated and have shared kitchen and bathroom facilities. But unfortunately, it's almost impossible to shoehorn what you want to do into an allowable use, that being a rooming house. That's the dilemma or the conundrum we're facing here, is your use probably would actually enhance maybe the immediate environment of Crawford Street, but it's a use that's not permitted. That's the dilemma.
I don't
Well,
think anybody wants that building to go back to what it was.
and I think everybody here would agree with you on that, Mr. Rice. I don't think that anybody disagrees. But we're dealing with we're dealing with a code where all criteria for the use of the changing of a use and granting of a variance, all of those criteria have to be satisfied. Not just one, not like a dimensional use, a dimension variance where we several might, most won't. In this case, all have to, and I just don't. I just don't see without the zoning ordinance being changed that that your use falls within a permissible purpose or permissible use, not purpose.
Change on B2.
Yeah, definitely very difficult, all factors considered. That, again, reiterate what I've said many times, appreciate the work that's being done, and I only hope the best for the young men that are here. I truly mean that. I know all of us do. And, but based on our code and our criteria, and again, want to point out hardship as we look at this. The question again, as our code was changed in 2018, impermissible use for a transitional housing, that's our starting point. And then whether or not there is, whether we can look at the criteria and meet, in a reasonable way, a use variance. I would like us to look at this page for a criteria where we talk about whether or not the property can it be another viable use? I believe that it can. We had the definition up of a rooming facility at that, there's a lot of other uses that could actually be done besides transitional housing. But I think I would be in favor of denying the application. In addition to the criteria not being met and it being an impermissible use, as these young men transition, and I would certainly hope in your work that we could do better for those young men than what we're doing on Crawford Avenue. I think there's more suitable locations for what you're aiming to achieve than what we have on 409 Crawford. That's absent the facts of this case right now, but
Those neighborhoods are almost impossible to work with.
I would disagree, but that's not where we're at in this particular case. The issue before us is just whether or not that we want to issue this variance case on the facts that were presented tonight. Where would the board like to go this evening? Approve or deny? I would be in favor of denying the application.
I don't think we have a choice. I'll move that we do deny the application.
I'll second that.
So Mr. Anberg, you made the motion to deny. Mr. Ward seconded the motion.
Discussion on the motion?
Discussion.
Well, does anybody have any other words to say about this? I think we are ready to vote.
Christopher Ambergy,
Yes.
David Cash,
Yes.
Jerry Heidenreich,
Yes.
Dan Ward.
He didn't hear you, Dan.
Oh, yes.
Todd Moore,
Yes.
Jim Hall.
Yes.
I'm just asking the question because now I have to go back to our donors that have given, I don't know, speeches, but that's not your problem. Is there an appeal process beyond this?
Yes, there is.
So, Mr. Rice, any person or entity claiming to be injured or aggrieved by any final action of the Board of Zoning Appeals has the right to appeal the decision to the Court of Common Pleas as provided in the Ohio Revised Code chapters 2505 and 2506. I read this previously in the outcome letter that I will write for you tomorrow, and I will mail that to you. it'll have some instructions, and any part of the development code I can print off and attach it to your letter. Thank you.
Sir? Might want to call a counselor.
I don't know. We will have to consider it. I appreciate your time.
Good luck, young man.
Good, thank you.
Old or new business? I would like to raise one question tonight. We had a use variance case come back before us. We've had quite a lot of discussion about whether or not Board of Zoning Appeals should be responsible for use variance cases. As you remember, we had, this goes back to Mr. Pelnick being in the city at that time, where there was discussion about eliminating the use variance throughout the code, and then it was narrowed down to whether or not Planning Commission reviews those types of cases, whether Board of Zoning Appeals reviews. What's the current status of that potential change? Has there been any kind of further discussion about that would be done, or will things stay the same?
As far as I'm aware, things are going to stay the same.
With Board of Zoning Appeals reviewing use variance cases, I think previously the discussion was whether or not Planning Commission actually looked at this as well, whether they would be primarily the body that would review use variance cases. We, on the Board of Zoning Appeals, would handle area dimensional variance cases. That would be the work would be separate from Planning Commission. Planning Commission would assume these types of cases. If I recall correctly, that was a discussion with Planning Commission, and at that time, I think maybe you were transitioning into the job. So it could be, I'm not sure where it's at in the process, but.
Yeah, so when I started, it was at the time that we had the meeting with the lawyer, Ben Yoder, to discuss, the BZA and discuss the differences between interdimensional variances and use variances. And I knew at that point in time, our current city administration, the top, wanted to either get rid of the use variance or consider switching it to the Planning Commission, which is a legislative body, or quasi-legislative. As far as I know, as we've had quite a bit of leadership change, that's kind of been put on the back burner. And we're going to continue as things were, and I think they have some different fish to fry at this moment.
Okay. Fair enough. All right. Mm-hmm. Any other new or old business? No?
Then we adjourn.
No messing around. Well, all those in favor of adjournment say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? We are adjourned.
On Crawford Street, across the street from that, there's a needle exchange every month. You put those kids in that environment, even if they're super good, they got a real chance of